leveraging earned media influencers in fintech marketing. Let's give them a warm welcome to the stage for the very last session at Canberra. Come on, Converge stage. Come on, let's give them a warm welcome, folks. No time left, that's the world around. Cause you know where I'll be back when I come around. When I come around.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am amazed that everyone has lasted this long at Money 2020. We are the closing session, so congratulate yourself for making it. I'm Ashley Jones. I lead Financial Narrative, which is the premier networking group for financial Marcomms leaders. All the folks on this stage and quite a few who have graced some of the other stages are our members. So I'm thrilled to be here today with several of our members who are really fantastic leaders who make a lot of decisions around the types of media and the types of places that they're going to invest their budget dollars, right? So quickly, let's do a lightning round of introductions. Tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your experience with influencers and owned media.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Levy. I'm from LinkedIn, where I lead our global financial services marketing. Just want to give a thank you to the Financial Narrative and from Money 2020 for having us. And so my team produces a lot of industry thought leadership. We curate events and experiences really to share the value proposition of LinkedIn to the financial services community. And this week, we are launching a new report, The Business of Influence in Financial Services, where we really talk about building trust and enabling business decisions or buyer decisions through financial services influence from marketing.
So hi, I'm Mike Marinello. I run communications for JP Morgan Payments, which is a 30,000 person, $18 billion a year fintech within the JP Morgan universe. I've been there about 18 months, and I was brought there because of my past experiences in both communications and in influencer marketing and influencer usage and paid media. So what we're doing right now is building the infrastructure to deploy a lot of the things that I've used in my past career, and also doing some things right now that we're just getting us off the ground in that past.
Hi, I'm Britt Williams. I'm the CMO of EarnIn. I've been there for about 4 years and really established the marketing department there from the ground up. So influencer marketing is relatively new to us. We just launched our social channels in earnest, I would say, about 18, 24 months ago. So our adventure into influencer and own channels has been a rapid one.
All right. So I think a lot of the marketing comms folks here spend a lot of time. How do you prioritize your budget? How do you make the decision? So as you're doing that, and as you're thinking about what tactics you're going to use, what factors do you take into consideration just before as you're building the plan?
So I think the first thing, we always think is what's the business impact we're trying to achieve, and then how do we measure that? So we can both build an infrastructure to support it, but then measure something to show your stakeholders or your financiers, if you will, that you're doing the job that you set out to do. So when I went to JP Morgan, it's a great example, was the first thing I asked for was not a team, but I asked for them to finance my ability to measure what the team is going to do over time so that we could absolutely deliver. So for me, it's always figuring out what's the business goal, and whether that's increase sales, increase awareness, hire more people, and then how do you build an infrastructure and a data and metrics organization, if you will, or infrastructure to then support and prove the work that you're doing over time. Because it both shows the outputs and impact of what you're doing, and it's a great way to get more money if you show them that you're doing it well.
Yeah, absolutely. Britt, what about you?
So I would echo that. It's interesting when you're building from the ground up, you have to make choices about where you're going to start. The analytics team, I think, was one of the most critical, just so you can understand what you're doing, understand what's performing, understanding the media and how it's paying off, and really like the ROI that it's driving for the business. So we always start with that. What is the business objective? It's always funny to me how often in marketing, sometimes we don't start with the business objective. I don't know how that happens, but I think it's the most critical piece. And then you build a strategy and the team on top of it.
And there's one just quick thing I'll add is that, and I don't think a lot of us as practitioners realize this, but there is some science behind, like decreasing price sensitivity if you raise your voice, or by increasing engagement internally, you actually can increase bottom line production. So there is some science behind that as well, and I think a lot of times we miss that opportunity to share that. So sorry,
Yeah, of course.
I'd also say that, our LinkedIn research is showing that B2B marketers are making increased investments when it comes to influencer marketing. And it's in line that, buyers are really seeking content from trusted industry influencers. And there's enormous pressure from CMOs to be able to, show ROI and just show impact. Now, I'd say, when thinking about your strategy, as you said, Mike, you want to align it to really your business objectives. What are your strategic priorities? And also, what are your marketing objectives? Is it lead gen? Is it just awareness? Or is it a wider, full funnel marketing strategy? And lastly, it's audience insights. Who are you looking to target? And you want to make sure that, that influencer is aligned with the audience that you're seeking to engage.
Absolutely. So this group, as we were prepping, had a lot of conversations about the word influencer because it can be interpreted a lot of different ways. So Karen, why don't you tell us a little bit about your philosophy on what the word influencer means?
Sure. So 3 types of influencers. You have creators, you have experts, and you have your curators. And so, a creator is someone that, is producing original content. So you're thinking about product demos, you're thinking about how-to guides. A really good example of someone is Nadia Vanderhall. She's a marketer turned financial planner. And then you have your experts. So you're thinking about someone with deep subject matter expertise, your executive voices. Last night, I heard JP Morgan Cayman's global co-head Max Mukherjee. Thank you, Mike. And he's a really good example of an expert influencer. With his expertise and importantly, having authentic leadership. And then you have your curator. The curator is really the gatekeeper between the creator and the expert. Ashley, you're a fantastic example of a curator influencer where you're really bringing together, minds and voices, to be able to share expertise. And I'd also say that there's blurred lines between each of these areas. Someone like Scarlett Sieber, who's the Chief Strategy and Growth Officer here at Money20. She's an expert in her own way within financial services. She's also, curating by bringing all of us here together. And she's also creating where she has a lot of original content where she's talking about, home life and her amazing sneaker collection.
Mike, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that's when you talk about influencers, you have to think about who are you trying to influence first, and then who has the ability to influence that audience. And so, I think people get too caught up in that person's an influencer, so let me use them to impact my audience when they might not have any correlation to it. So I've had a lot of experience over time using popular culture and celebrity and things like that to influence, but not because it was cool, although it was a lot of fun, but it actually, we did the research beforehand to show that, one of the closest ways to close a gap with the audience who we were trying to reach was through popular culture. So we did the homework and legwork before. And I think that's the thing, that we can't get lost in, is that figuring out it's not taking the influencer and applying them to the audience. It's who's the audience, what are we trying to get them to do, and then what's the roster of influencers, famous or not, who can then help move that audience in the needle.
Absolutely. Britt, what do you think?
It's interesting. We've been using our customers as our influencer, and it's been amazing. We have a lot of folks who are actually on the platform, so there are all these amazing platforms that you can use to sort of scale quickly your influencer marketing. And we were lucky to find that a lot of our customers existed there, but we're also reaching out to them directly. So being able to connect with the customer, we find that the customer voice just really authentically connects with the rest of our customers, and it really drives more of that conversation and engagement that we're looking. And also for our product, we're looking to really educate in many ways. And so being able to help customers understand from the voice of their peers what the product is, the role that it can play in their life, how they're using and utilizing the product every day, really helps.
And I would say similarly, we're looking at that internally, like just you're trying to build a culture. And, we did some research about the things that we were publishing internally and what were our colleagues looking or reading most. And what we found out was that, and I don't think it was a surprise, but it was great to have the data, was that they were more interested in hearing stories of their other colleagues, either about their lives, their jobs, their roles. And so that's a different influencer audience, but they're still influencers. And again, you can do that on the internal side too. who's going to move your internal audience, how that's going to grow your culture, and then how do you use those individuals, or even just not specific individuals, but just the concept of individual stories as a tool to make that influence happen.
Yeah, I think those stories, whether they come from inside your organization, from the voice of the customer, which brings a lot of authenticity to the story, or someone who we might traditionally consider to be an influencer. There's a lot of different angles to take as you approach it. So, also, influencer marketing can be an interesting path. Mike, I've heard you tell some off-the-record stories about just how interesting it can get. But tell me, what would you take into consideration? I'll start with you, Britt. What do you take into consideration when you are considering starting a relationship with someone as an influencer from any of these categories?
So first and foremost, we're looking at brand safety, honestly. If we're going to associate ourselves with someone, we want to make sure that they're going to effectively represent our community well, especially because I think it's really important that you have an authentic voice and you want to utilize that voice. And so you have to be able to let the creator start to engage a little bit with your content and set them free so that it feels really like ownable content for them, and frankly that they're excited about it. And so one of the first things that we look at is really brand safety. The second thing, we do a lot of research just to understand what are the interests of our customers. I'm always surprised by what sticks with people. The type of content, we did a piece of content once around the holidays where it was just a woman making a gingerbread house out of a cardboard box, and it blew up, like completely blew up. And we were like, what is going on? But it's really, we have a customer who's really busy, is trying to save money, has a family. And so just this really simple thing paid off incredibly well for us. And so I think it's really just looking for that connection.
I love that.
Yeah. And I would just say too, I mean, yeah, it's what you said 100%. It's again, understanding the audience. And then it's really, again, they have to be someone that you can trust because of that brand.
Yes.
Right. And so, especially when you're looking at popular culture, right, and especially when you're dealing with individuals who are out in the spotlight, you have to really understand whether they're a genuine individual, whether you want to partner with them. I think the secret sauce, and we talked about this before, is when that someone's actually already using your product or is interested in the space you're in, because then you get this confluence of great brand, they already know your stuff, and now you have a way to influence an audience that that's even greater, because you're not teaching that individual about JP Morgan or about LinkedIn or about different brand. Anyway, it's just that they're already there, right? So I think that's not. And then the last thing I would just say this is that, and it goes back to brand health and brand awareness, is that you can't get too wrapped up in the fact that this is a famous person or this is right. You can't get, as I always say, seduced by the influencer culture, because that then you lose your North Star on why you're using them in the first place. So those are sort of things I think about.
I would build on that. Influencer work can get really sparkly, really fast. And you can also spend a ton of money very quickly that is not going to pay off for you. And so you have to be very intentional about it.
I just want to reinforce brand reputation. Edelman Trust Barometer tells us that financial services is one of the least trusted industries, which makes our jobs a little bit more challenging. And challenge brings opportunity. So definitely a lot of consideration to thinking about the influencers that you want to bring in to partner with you.
Absolutely. No, agree. Yeah. Having that trust with your partner, whoever your partner is critical. So if you could give this audience, I'm sure some of the people here are actually considering their own influencer programs, one tip to build an influencer program. I'm going to start with Mike.
I think it goes back to what I was saying before. Understand who you're trying to influence and why before you look at the influencer themselves and whether they can actually be influenced. And I think that's the big tip, right? Start from the absolute core and the base of who's the audience and why you're doing this. And then I think because then it's hard to go wrong from there, because you've already built in a North Star, because you know what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. So that would be if you're going to start it, please start from square one.
Yeah. Karen, where would you take that?
I would say collaborate with your influencer. Bring them into the creative process so that you can create original and, importantly, authentic content together.
Yeah. Britt?
Same thing. Just really embrace the creator voice. I think we learn so often from the things that don't work out, and some of our early forays we really tried to overscript it, frankly. It doesn't work. So you really have to have those phones talking points, but also let them embrace that content, come back to you with a script, come back to you with an idea, because you're just going to get a much better result.
And I would just say, one of the experiences I had in a former job where we worked with professional golfers, and the entire influencer campaign was geared external. And so we as individuals weren't really getting to know the golfers and their personalities because they were just projecting out. But when we turned the program inward for our colleagues, we got to know the individuals more, and we were able to get to use them more, and then they got more invested in the brand and with the work they were doing because they started to realize the people they were representing by representing the company. So there's other ways to build those relationships. You listen to their voice and co-create, but you also get to know them.
Yeah, I have heard people talk about the importance of actually bringing the influencer into your culture and having an internal program with that individual as well, which I think is a really strong tip to your point for making it more authentic, for making a more realistic relationship. We're going to shift now to owned channels. A lot of us are curating own channels, whether that's starting your own podcast or it's on our website, etc. So many options. How do you, and I'll start with you, Britt, how do you assess or think about the value of an owned channel, whether it's one that already exists or one that you're thinking about creating?
So we're really moving from a world where we're primarily focused on performance marketing into expanding what we do, but it still starts with growth. So when I think about our own channels, honestly, I'm still thinking about our website, even with the evolution of AI. So what is it doing in terms of search ranking? What does the content look like? This is old school, but even how fast is the website still? So really making sure that all of our own channels are completely optimized. When it comes to own channels on social, it really is much more about conversations. So we are looking at those engagement metrics, and I think the days of sort of likes are over. We're really looking for true conversation. We're looking for people who want to share that content, want to save that content, and really tracking that over time to see what performs and then building on that success. And I think it's really just about always measuring those own channels very, very rigorously. I think it's one of those things that it's easy. It would be easy a little bit to ignore when you have hardworking dollars somewhere else, but they are incredibly important touch points.
Yeah, and I would say along those lines too, it's almost making sure that the own channels have a hub and spoke approach where that they all work together and there's a rationale for why you're using each. Because you do need an omni-channel approach. It's sort of a fuzzy word.
Yeah.
But you need a multi-channel approach, but they all need to be connected in some way or form. And then what they can do is give you new opportunities. So one of the things we've done recently was we have on our website, we have these things called insights pieces. And we were just thinking, the external team was thinking about new ways of engaging media. And so what we started to do was, instead of always pitching them or sending press releases or getting on the phone, we started to use these insight pieces about a part of the business or something that had happened, a customer journey, whatever, posting them and then just sending them to the reporters as FYIs. And as a result, they became more interested in these pieces, more interested in writing stories, and now themselves are going to the insights channels to see what we're doing, and then we're getting calls about interested in coverage or seeing it picked up in coverage. So it's again, like, get to play with it too and see where you can go, and it opens up new opportunities.
Well, and some of the work that you're doing for those own channels can have and drive a lot more value for you if you just look at it and think well, maybe it belongs here, but could it also go over here? I mean, the repurposing.
Well, the whole thing with the own channel is like, it's not the creation, it's what you do with it, right? So you create the content on these own channels, but then how do you distribute it?
Yeah.
Right? Who gets it? And so one of the things, like, we're working on a podcast right now without the idea that anyone's actually going to listen to it. Right? So if you start from that, you're going to have success. But our real target audience is our 30,000 colleagues, period. But there's high utility because we're already talking to the sales team about how they could send the podcast to their top 10 clients or their top 10 prospects. And so, so it's distribution and utility of the content is actually where I think the real value comes from own channels.
Yeah, and the value also is really leaning into your employees as ambassadors. Employees who share their company content, amplify it 14 times larger than their company. And about 30% of the engagement on company content does come from employees.
Yeah, absolutely. So as marketers, we know we sometimes have to make the case for some of our ideas. And sometimes that's make the case like, yes, we really do want to start that podcast. And sometimes it's make the case, hey, CEO, you also have to be on the podcast. So both sides of this, which can be challenging. I mean, I know some of us have shy executives or people who don't really want to be in the spotlight. Tell me how you make the case for both of those, both for the budget and for the participation. We'll start you through.
Sure. So I'd say it's all about the data, right? You want to be able to demonstrate ROI. You want to see what your competitors are doing. You want to be able to really establish your KPIs and your key benchmarks. It's also important that you influence the influencers. You need to really understand who your internal champions are that can help you to make that case. And then I'd also say start small. Have a pilot and test and learn.
Yeah, I agree. I think you start with ROI and purpose, right? Again, like, why are we doing this? What are we trying to influence or impact? How are we trying to move the needle? And then set that as the goal. And again, you have to be in an organization that will allow you to try things and is interested in looking for new opportunities. So that helps too. But you have to get buy-in from leadership and from the individual stakeholders, because if you go off and do something without that, then you have to prove not only what you did, but then why they should care about it. Right? So I think it's ROI, but it's also buy-in before you go out the doors, because then you're sort of, again, setting yourself up for success. And it can be a trial. It can be like, hey, we're just doing this for seeing if it works. But that could be the goal and rationale, and everyone gets on board with it. But you have to be really clear and upfront as to the ROI and purpose, I think.
Yeah. I mean, even on a more practical level, the way that we structure our budget is actually structured around that experimentation. So, like, the ROI that I deliver on sort of programs that we know over time and have been really familiar with are very different than the ROI that is expected to deliver, so that we have a little bit of leeway. And I do think it really comes down to your executive appetite. So, like, does your leadership team does your CFO, does your CEO have the appetite to do that level of experimentation? And because everything's not going to work out on the first try, right? Like, we've been working with Reddit. After 2 or 3 tries, it really started to see, like, okay, we think we're going to be able to crack this channel. Same thing with YouTube. We changed our approach entirely on YouTube in terms of the content that we were putting out there. And all of a sudden it starts to work. So I think you just need to have the leeway and space, but I don't think you don't get that very long if you're not rigorously measuring it and you're coming back with those results.
And you recently had a conversation and continue to do about paid media, right? So why do you do paid media without this? And as I've been explaining it to our leadership, from my perspective, we use paid to get earned, right? So you look at targets or publications that you're having a hard time getting into, and you use the paid media as an opportunity to get them to know who you are. And then that can open up earned media opportunities. So it's all looking at appetite, right, and ROI and purpose. And we've seen that work. But we were talking about that with Max last night. You use paid to drive earned, but you don't just do paid for paid, right? Because then it's just you're paying for stuff to happen, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the hardest ones, actually. Like, explaining why you need to do paid media to get earned media. It's still so counterintuitive,
right?
But it's incredibly true.
Yeah. We've actually seen tremendous success at LinkedIn, with customers in finance using something called thought leader ads. Thought leader ads help really to elevate your influencer content. And what we've seen is over 250% increase in click-through rates, from these ads alone.
Yep.
That's huge. Britt, as a follow-up, I'm curious, in terms of a piece of pie of your overall marketing budget, how big of a piece of pie would you say goes towards experimentation every year? Because that's a lot of trust from your executives, right?
I don't know that I am allowed to say.
Fair.
But I will say that it's a decent amount. It's a decent amount because the channels are always changing. New channels are coming online. The business objectives always change. The way that you're going to test a small performance channel is going to be very different than, say, testing something like consideration, awareness, brand campaigns. Those just come with very different price tags.
Yeah, and I'd say from a startup perspective, I've always had to look for different centers to sort of get initial funding. So at JP Morgan, I have a great partner in Dustin Cedric, who's the CMO. And we are partners. We both sit independently on the operating committee. And he was the one who went to the leadership and said, we need to build a comms organization. and I'm willing to give my part of my budget to get them off the ground. And so that's what we were able to do. And then I finally was able to go back to finance this year and say, I don't want to be a tax on Destin anymore. We've proven our value, and can we start? So that's how we've been able to do it. But I think having that initial investment and purpose behind it, and that gives you some credibility and also gives you some support, right, to make that happen.
Yeah. So, as it should, the term ROI has come up, I think, like 30 times in this conversation already. So, there's a lot out there to measure, and there's a lot to focus on. There's a lot to report on. But can you talk to us about how you're measuring the success of an influencer campaign, an owned campaign, and how your C-suite views those measurements? What do they actually care about, other than did our bottom line, did we go up into the right this year?
So from when we measure a lot on our own media side, and I put a lot of purpose behind it, and it's really interesting. I actually have co-heads who I report to, and they each have a different perspective on it, right? So it's fun, but thankfully we measure both, because one wants volume, right? He wants volume and awareness, and the other wants quality, and isn't so concerned about volume. And thankfully we measure both, but it's making sure that you're articulating that and measuring it in a way that it is resonating with them, and that they see that that's how we're starting to continue to report back to them. Right? So we also just, one of the leaders just asked me and the team to start thinking about 3 different buckets of the type of coverage, and then measure that type of coverage. And those 3 areas are about how much press are we doing to disrupt the marketplace, how much press are we doing to sort of address growth opportunities, and how much press are we doing around our base business. Not because they wanted to maybe allocate, but they just want to actually see it and then make an assessment on where we should be spending money. So we're going through that right now, and we'll hopefully have by the end of the year so we can say, oh, maybe we're spending a little too much on disrupt and not enough on the base. Yeah. So that's it too. Like, you have a great partner and they want to know what we're doing, and then they come up with their own ideas.
Well, and creating those baselines from where you stand today, before you attempt to set any kind of goal around where you want to be. I mean,
yeah. Well, and that was the thing. Our first year we were measuring against industry performance, but now it's 18 months. So this year we'll look back on our own performance, and that's when you can really start, making a difference, because you're measuring against yourself now.
Now, Britt, I know you get very granular on ROI, so let's talk about that a little bit.
I think this is the area that is frankly the hardest. I can run a geolift campaign on a set of channels and get a very direct incrementality on that. This really, honestly, it's really similar to what you said. It's really that share of voice. It's the sentiment metrics. I will say one of the things that's really interesting is sometimes it's as much. The other thing I think that's difficult to explain, and you'll know this better than anyone, Mike, that it's hard to explain the benefit of a neutral review. So the amount, there's also a lot of time that we put in, especially in earned media, where if nothing happens, that's a really big win. So there are the tangibles and the intangibles. We can certainly see it in the sentiment metrics, but I do think that also just reporting out on the way that you're operating as a comms team can be really valuable.
Yeah, and we actually, that's what we've been doing over time is measuring in the 3 areas. It's positive, neutral, and negative. And then you have a blended neutral positive rate to show this is actually a good, it's a good judgment of our share of voice being good for the marketplace.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but it's hard to say neutral is good. And and the other thing, having worked in communications, there's so many stories that never see the light of day that we've worked months on.
Yeah.
And that's hard to measure. You can't. Right, so that's another thing that's like the holy grail. If you can ever measure that, but that's another thing that's tough to prove out too.
But you have to make that investment, because I think, Sharon, going back to what you were saying earlier, trust is paramount. Trust is paramount. I think it's not just for the consumer. I think it's for your employees. I think you want to go into a partnership with someone like Disney. It's the first place that they're going to look at your brand reputation. So you have to be able to build that trust, and so the sentiment becomes incredibly important.
Yeah, a funny story on the story killing though is when I was at Microsoft, I worked for the general counsel, and he said, no one gives you credit for the stories you don't, that you kill. So, right, the story that never made the letter. So they started to, I don't know if anyone follows college football, but some of them, they put stickers on their helmets when they make a good play. So they started putting stickers on my door for every story I killed. It's some recognition.
Well, and you said on the comm side, killing the story is a big accomplishment. So this